Good afternoon. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a psychotherapist. I work with parents, children, and about half of my caseload is teachers also. My caseload represents about 20 different school districts in Suffolk County. In the summer of 2012, my elementary school teachers started to report increased anxiety over having to learn 2 entirely new curricula for math and ELA. And that was when I first heard about the change to the curricula to a one-size-fits-all, taking the imagination and innovation out of the hands of the teachers. In the fall of 2012, my phone started ringing. I started getting an inordinate number of referrals of students, a lot of honors students, 8th graders mostly, who were self-mutilating. They were cutting themselves with sharp objects, and they were burning themselves with cigarettes. My phone never stopped. And I didn't know why. I asked the kids, and all they kept saying was, "We can't take the pressure, it's too much." I also started getting a lot of elementary school students referred to me. They were refusing to go to school. They said they felt stupid and that school was too hard. They were throwing tantrums, begging to stay home, and upset to the point of vomiting. I was hearing from parents about kids bringing home homework they couldn't help them with. I was alarmed to hear that in some cases there were no textbooks for the parents to look at, and they had no idea what their children were learning. The teachers were reporting a staggering level of anxiety and depression, and that was when I first heard the term Common Core and learned about the standards that we now say set the bar so high anyone can walk right under it. Everyone was talking about the tests. As the school year progressed and the tests loomed, my patients were increasing their self-mutilating behaviors. They were complaining of insomnia, panic attacks, loss of appetite, depressed mood, and in one case, suicidal thoughts that resulted in a 2-week hospital stay for an adolescent. I don't know of any formal studies that connect these symptoms to the Common Core, but I really don't think we need to sacrifice an entire generation of children just to get the correlation. The Common Core and high-stakes testing is creating a hostile working environment for teachers and consequently a hostile learning environment for students. When I first heard about the Common Core, APPR, and high-stakes testing, my first thought was, who is going to rate the parents? I see children and teenagers who are exhausted, running from activity to activity, living on fast food, then texting, using social media, and playing games well into the wee hours of the morning on school nights. We have children taking cell phones into the classrooms, tweeting and texting each other all day. We have parents, and yes, parents, who are texting their children during the school day. Let's add in bullying and cyberbullying that torments our children, even to the point of suicide, and the interminable drug problem that we have. And these variables affect student performance, and we make the teachers responsible for their performance. The SED holds them accountable, substituting innovation and individualism with cookie-cutter standards, believing that's going to fix our schools. We can't regulate biology. Young children cannot engage in the type of critical thinking that the Common Core calls for. That would require a fully developed prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that is not fully functional until adulthood. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for critical thinking, rational decision-making, and abstract thought, all things that the Common Core requires prematurely. We give children pre-assessments, tell them to succeed, and then give them tests on material they haven't learned and tell them it's okay to fail. They cannot resolve that mixed message. Last spring, a 6-year-old encountered a multiplication sign on the NWEA first grade math exam and asked the teacher what it was. The teacher was not allowed to help him and told him to just do his best. From that point on, the student's test performance went downhill. He couldn't shake off the unfamiliar symbol and couldn't believe his teacher wouldn't help him. The Common Core requires children to read informational texts that are owned by a handful of corporations. They don't have a filter to distinguish good information from bad. So whatever you put in front of them, they take that as gospel. They're literal. So when we give them a textbook that explains the Second Amendment as, the people have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia, they will look no further for clarification. We ask them to write critically using emotionally charged language to persuade instead of inform. They don't have that functional prefrontal cortex. So they tap into their limbic system, which is the part of the brain that involves basic human emotions, anger and fear being the foremost. So when we ask them to use emotionally charged language, we're actually asking them to fuel their language with fear and anger and aggression. They cannot temper this judgment. They don't have the ability to do that. So we teach to the test, which I think doesn't really measure learning. I think the tests measure endurance and resilience. Only a child who can sit still for 90 minutes, come back the next day and do it again, and the next day again, can succeed. I'm going to introduce you to a couple, I'm almost done. I'm going to introduce you just a couple of student stories, okay? A couple of the faces of the Common Core. We have an entire third grade class that spent the entire day sobbing after one testing session. A second grader who witnessed this is now in third grade and won't go to school. She's being evaluated, a 7-year-old being evaluated for psychotropic medication just to get her to go to school. A 6-year-old who came home crying because in September, in the first grade, she didn't know what a vertex was. 2 8-year-olds opted out of the ELA exam and were publicly denied cookies because the teacher gave them to the class but wouldn't give them to them. And that teacher, who under duress, felt obligated to do such a thing. A 6th grader who once aspired to be a writer but now won't do it because we do it all day long, even in math. And a mother who has to leave work early because her son is hysterical over his math homework, and his CPA grandfather who's babysitting for him can't even help him do it. And countless other kids who are refusing to go to school, feel stupid, and now are completely turned off to education. I will conclude with this one thought. Our country became a superpower on the backs of men and women who learned in one-room schoolhouses. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a great deal of technology or corporate or government involvement to help our children to succeed. We need to rethink the Common Core and the associated high-stakes testing and get back to the business of educating our children in a safe, healthy, and productive manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your opinions on this with us today, because this really is, I think, part of the crux of the issue. We can talk a lot about the educational standards and reaching certain standards and everything, but these are human beings. They're not robots. The teachers aren't robots, and if it was as simple as some might want to make it to be, maybe that's what we would have, robots teaching the kids or something like that, because when a child gets discouraged about education, we've lost them at that point. And until we get them back on track, they're just not going to learn the same. They're not going to absorb the information. So I think it's very important that you added that, to add your voice today. Just one quick question. As I've talked to a lot of my constituents, we heard a lot about the testing last spring, and now what I'm hearing a lot about is a kid that most years goes to school, they're excited about a new school year, and now we're ramping up the instruction, because as we know, we started with teaching something, testing something that the children have never been taught, but now we're getting into the teaching side of it and the rapid pace of it, and teachers not feeling like they have the ability to slow it down to make sure all the children are absorbing the information. So I'm just wondering, if you've seen any type of different impact from the testing itself as opposed to the pace of the instruction.
The testing, at testing time, I can say that my kids and my teachers were in a total anxiety state. The kids were a wreck. And no matter how many times we sat down and told them they're not really testing you, that scores aren't going to count, this is really about seeing how much you've learned and how well the teachers, it just didn't matter. The kids were an absolute wreck. And I didn't really know about the Common Core last September, but when they were taking the pre-tests and coming in and they kept telling me, I'm taking my final exams on material, kids who were taking Spanish were looking at a language they didn't even know, and I was baffled, and they were baffled, and I just didn't even know what to say to them at that point. But the anxiety level around September and March, April, when the tests were being given, through the roof. Not sleeping, stomach ache, I don't want to go. parents who were opting out their kids but terrified to opt their kids out. It was just, and the teachers were a wreck.
Okay. Thank you. Al?
Is this on?
There you go.
Okay. Now, in your profession, you've taken courses on child development, and you've been exposed to some of the questions or the curriculum that the kids are going to, that they're supposed to be able to handle, correct?
Yes.
Have you looked at some of the curriculum?
Yes, I have.
And you've
Mostly the math I've seen.
Right, and you study, and, you know, in attaining your degree, you studied child development.
Yes, that is correct.
And are you finding that what they're asking these kids to do is developmentally, you know, appropriate for these children?
I strongly believe that a lot of it is developmentally inappropriate, to especially this this focus on persuasion and persuasive writing and arguing basically, is developmentally inappropriate when a child's prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. They tap into the limbic system. The limbic system is it's like primal, it's basic, and it's really fully charged by the flight or fight, you know, adrenaline rush, anger, fear, and that's what they tap into. And so that's where we see all of the anxiety, and that's where we see a lot of acting out behaviors.
Okay.
They can't persuade at that age.
Yeah. Percentage-wise, how big of an increase have you seen with kids coming into your office?
Oh, it's at least doubled. At least doubled, if not more.
And are you seeing teachers also?
Yes.
And what's the percentage of an increase of teachers that you're now?
I would not say I've had a percentage increase in teachers referred to me. I've had a percentage increase, or I've seen a huge increase in their symptomology. I've had teachers who were almost ready for discharge, who are now medicated, who are, you know, stepping up their therapists, that had them maybe down to every other week, who have now had to increase to weekly sessions. So you know, there's most definitely a strain on them. Usually, come August, I start to hear kids and teachers saying to me, you know, I'm starting to get bored. I'm getting ready to go back. This August, they were, you know, I don't want to go back. Teachers sick to their stomachs about having to go back to work.
Okay, and now these children with the self-mutilization, did they have a history of that before
No,
this?
no prior history. I mean, I've had children who were self-mutilating. This is not a new phenomenon. It's the sheer volume of the number of kids that were coming into my practice, and it wasn't just from one school with one kid teaching other kids. It was coming from every district, and my office is in Stony Brook. I service at least 20 different districts, and every district, every middle school, high school, you know, junior highs in some districts. It wasn't unique to one school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.